Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of The Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined as always by one of the most accurate rankers in the entire fantasy community, John Paulson. John, how are we doing this fine morning?
Week 5 sneaky starts. I'm excited. I get excited now for Thursdays. Just got some sneaky starts. Let's go.
Let's go. We're already in October. I'm a little chilly right now in my room, so you know it's football season when you start getting a little cold and we're in these burr months, you know what I mean? So I'm excited. Week 5, we're the train is moving on week by week. So in case you did not know, or this is the first time you're listening to this, we pick 2 players per position, so 8 players total that we consider to be sneaky starts on the week, guys that you can feel confident throwing into your lineup or feel even more confident. If they were already like entering your lineup, you might even feel more confident about them and their production for this week. And then we'll end with a Bleacher Nation fantasy card. Our card hit last week, so we won you some money on a 6x or potentially an even higher payout because your Jordan Love leg that you did not officially name, but we did mention, also hit as well. So if you threw that in there, and it was a 4-legger that hit as well. So we're going to test our hand on that again for week 5 and see where we land. But let's start off with the quarterback position. John, why don't you kick us off with your quarterback sneaky start for week 5?
Yeah, well, like the Love pick, we're attacking this Dallas defense, which is not good. The secondary or the pass defense, especially. Justin Fields, maybe this is not so sneaky. I might have some people yelling at me, but Fields has had 2 really good games, 29.5, 27.1 fantasy points. And then he had a week 2 dud, which was only 4 points. But that game, he exited early after getting concussed, playing 61% of the snaps. So there's some downside. Like, things could go off the rails with this Jets team, but I think in general, they eventually get there. I mean, halftime, it was pretty ugly last week, and then all of a sudden in the second half, it came alive. And I think, against this Dallas team, they're giving up 27.5 fantasy points per game to opposing passers. Obviously, Jordan Love did well, and then Fields, even if the passing game isn't going great, he can get there with his legs, and typically does rush for 40 or 50 yards, potentially a touchdown as well. So I've got him, top 5 or 6 this week. I think he's going to play well.
I like the call a lot. We did just mention, though, before going on air, that sometimes the scariest thing about betting on these Jets or betting on Justin Fields specifically is when you expect the game to happen, that's usually when the rug gets pulled out from under you. I don't think that's going to be the case. This Dallas defense looks awful. And Justin Fields has been good more often than not this year, especially against worse defenses. So I think he gets it done for sure. My quarterback sneaky start this week is going to be new rookie quarterback Jaxson Dart for the New York Giants. They draw a matchup against the New Orleans Saints, they are 24th in adjusted fantasy points against quarterbacks this year. They have been beaten on the ground as well. Kyler had over 35 rushing yards. I think Josh Allen had 45 yards and a touchdown on the ground. We saw that was Jaxson Dart's kind of bread and butter in his first start last week, that he had 10 carries for over 50 yards and a touchdown on the ground too, with only 111 yards and 1 passing touchdown. So he didn't have to do much passing-wise. He wasn't asked to do much passing-wise. So I'm wondering if maybe Dable lets him throw a little bit more this week. Even without Malik Neighbors, I still think that Jaxson Dart is a very sneaky start. I actually saw an article or somebody posted that Dart has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder this week too. The Saints were one of the teams that he thought he could have been drafted by, and then they passed on him 9th overall, and then that led to the Giants trading back up into the first and grabbing him later. So there is kind of a little slight revenge game narrative, so to speak. You passed on me, and I'm going to show you why that was a bad decision. So I think Dart is a pretty solid start this week, especially whenever we have as many quarterback injuries as we have. We have 4 teams on bye with, Caleb's not playing, Love's not playing, Penix and Aaron Rodgers as potential backup options not playing this week. So I think Dart could be a very sneaky option if you need a quarterback.
I agree. The Saints have given up 221 passing yards, 2.3 touchdowns per game. I don't know if you mentioned that earlier, but I think you did mention the 38 yards to Kyler Murray, 45 yards to Josh Allen. They are susceptible to the run by quarterbacks. So 24th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. I think it's a good matchup, and I did write him up. That's why I have his stats in front of me. I think he's a good one. Good pick.
Moving on to the tight end position. John, do you want to give us your sneaky start for tight end this week?
Yeah, it's Darren Waller, and there's this kind of a funny. I just am chuckling about this 2-touchdown debut with Darren Waller. When he initially ended up with the Dolphins coming out of retirement, and I was kind of like semi-excited about this because he was in his prime, one of the best receiving tight ends in the league. I think a couple of years ago for the Giants, 500 yards receiving. So I felt like in this Jonnu Smith role, where he, was sort of resurrected his career with Mike McDaniel, that Waller could do some damage. Initial projections, once he landed there, put him at like tight end 20 or something like that. And with some upside, I think maybe even higher when I first initially ran his distributions, with maybe the Giants against the Dolphins numbers. Maybe had him at tight end 15, if I remember correctly, projecting. And then all this stuff about him not practicing, basically there's some footage of him landing and just like looking like he got injured. And then just like the whole narrative of him being dusted is just kind of came out. So I maybe I'm too bullish on this. And one of my blind spots, I think, are these really productive veterans and just kind of hanging on to them too long. But a lot of times that works out because people are bailing on them 3 years early and they should be waiting another year or two. So long story short, just did conversations with Connor Allen and just talking about Darren Waller being the answer to our tight end problems in the aforementioned FFPC main event league. We talked about, picking him up and just kind of chuckled about it and never did it. And so we're still sitting with Jake Tongas at tight end, waiting for George Kittle to come back. Meanwhile, he comes in 28% of the snaps, gets 4 targets, catches 2 touchdowns, 27 yards, receiving. Tyreek Hill is now out of the picture. So the Dolphins are just desperate for playmakers in the passing game. And if Darren Waller remains healthy, he's going to produce, I think. And he says that his role is going to grow this week. So it's not going to just be he's going to be a 30% player snap wise. It sounds like they're going to ramp him up. And if they're targeting him at any kind of rate like this with 4 targets on 28% of the snaps, then, if he gets to 50, 60% of the snaps, then, he's going to see 6-7 targets. And that's what we're looking for from our fantasy tight ends, is to try to get to that 6-7 mark. And, hopefully you have a consistent role in the passing game. And I think with Waller, that's the case. Carolina 19th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. They just gave up 2 for 39 and a touchdown to Hunter Henry, and 6 for 78 to Trey McBride, and 4 for 59 to Brenton Strange earlier this season. So it's a good matchup as well.
I had to laugh because you said 6-7, and my millennial brain-rotted brain went to this whatever the 6. I still don't even know what it means, but I think you caught it too whenever you said it.
I know it's a meme. My son chuckles about it too. I don't think it's anything bad. It's just taking over the middle schools and the high schools, weird. I guess. So yeah, 6-7.
We had a promo for it last week on Bleacher Nation Fantasy for Drew Waller's stat line that he hit. And that's all I'm going to talk about for the Penn State game as a Penn State fan. Anyway, I do like the Darren Waller call. I do think, as you mentioned, what was most notable is the fact that he had 4 targets on under 30% of snaps played. Seemed to be a very heavy red zone threat as well. So when you get down into the tight end muck, you are looking for possible touchdown upside. And Darren Waller seems to have that, and especially if he is going to be more of a heavily utilized or even moderately utilized guy in the target share without Tyreek Hill, then that's, there's your true ceiling. You have the floor of the potential touchdown with a ceiling of, 6, 7, 8 targets, something like that. So my tight end sneaky start is Mason Taylor. I'm going along with your quarterback sneaky start. I am grabbing the new rookie tight end for the New York Jets, and again, attacking this Dallas defense. We know how bad it is. Not every target is not going to be able to go to Garrett Wilson. I mean, maybe every target could go to Garrett Wilson, but there should be a few left over that go towards Mason Taylor, who kind of had a mini breakout game last week. He had 5 receptions for 65 yards on 7 targets. He also had 6 targets the week before in week 3. So his role as a rookie is kind of growing a little bit. He was a player that heading into the season, people kind of marked as the potential number 2 option for the New York Jets because they don't really have anybody else in the actual wide receiver position behind Garrett Wilson. And it certainly seems to be the case very early on that his role is growing and heading towards that number 2 role behind Wilson. So even though Dallas hasn't necessarily given up a ton of fantasy points to the tight end position, Tucker Kraft, had he scored once or even on both of those attempts that he got tackled on the one, that might change things a little bit, of course, in the fantasy numbers for Dallas against tight ends. But it certainly seems that when they don't really have anybody else to throw to besides Garrett Wilson, that it could be Mason Taylor as the second best quote unquote wide receiver on the team, even though he's at the tight end position. So I like him a lot this week as a sneaky start.
I didn't write him up, but that usage last 2 weeks, 6 and 7 in the last 2 games, that's what you're looking for from the tight end position. It's kind of the minimum. I mean, you can get away with 4 or 5 if it's red zone targets or they're being really highly productive. But I think if you're looking at him as the number 2 option in the passing game, that's what you kind of want out of your sneaky starts.
Let's move on to the running back position here. And John, I'm really happy that you are bringing up this name because I just think that it's a very interesting situation in backfield that we should be talking about. And I know there's a lot of discourse about it given the recent news. So why don't you hit us with your sneaky start at the running back position this week?
Yeah. If you go on Twitter and you say one of these 2 names, you're bound to piss off people and be called, get ridiculed for poor sample sizes or something or the other. Emari Demercado and Michael Carter, the debate rages on as to who will be the lead back with James Conner out for the year. Now, my initial take on this was Demercado has been active and playing, and Carter has been on the practice squad. And then we've seen this happen before where, we have an injury to a 3-down back or a first, second down back like Connor. He's really a 3-down back. And then somebody gets promoted from the practice squad who doesn't play special teams. And then that player ends up in the lead back role. And the guy who's playing third downs is still, in that change of pace third down role. Then that could happen here. Michael Carter alluded to the fact that he's starting. He said the quote was, "It's been a lot. You go from Pat Tillman, Scout Player of the Week, 1 week to starting the next." So people are taking that quote, running with it. There are also beat writers that are saying that Carter was first up in the running back drills, which could mean something. And if like Demercado was some little scat back, 180 pounds, that couldn't run the ball, I would be on board with, his role not changing. This might be one where I'm just want it to happen. Emari Demercado has had a top 20 rushing grade the last 2 seasons. It was like 6th in 2023, 20th out of 139 backs in 2024. He's good as a receiver. He's 21st out of 58 qualified backs in 2024. He's 215 pounds. He's got a career 6 yards per carry. And then, you get people say, well, he only runs on third down. No, he's, had 4.72 yards per carry on like 58 carries on first or second down. So he's good. So I'm hoping that he gets the lead back role. I have a feeling I'm going to be wrong on that, but I think in PPR formats, even half PPR formats, he probably has more upside. This is a weird game though, because it's Tennessee. Arizona could be in a really positive game script, and we might end up with Michael Carter, with 10 plus carries, Demercado with 8 touches or something like that. Anyway, my sneaky start is Emari Demercado, but I think Michael Carter is also usable. I actually picked him up in Scott Fishbowl just straight off the waiver wire without having to bid on him at all before all this broke, because we started hearing some rumors about Benson being in trouble injury-wise. So He's usable as well. I think both players will get some work, but I am rooting for Demercado to be that lead back.
I was initially on the I don't know which train I am on at this very moment right now. I feel like my answer has changed over the past like hour, or every hour it just changes back and forth. I was initially on the Demercado train when there was that Benson news that he might miss this week. This was before he was officially put on IR. So I was like, hey, if Trey Benson misses, I think it's going to be Emari Demercado, because like you said, he already was playing. We saw what he was able to do last week whenever Benson kind of had, I guess he had that injury on the final drive. That's why Demercado played all those snaps and then scored the touchdown on the Thursday night game last week. But so that's why I leaned into Emari Demercado a little bit more. And we had also seen him when James Conner was inactive. It was in 2023. Demercado came in. He had 20 carries for 78 yards and then 1 reception. And then the other game, he had 13 carries for 58 yards and then had 4 for 17 receiving. So those were 2 games for the Cardinals 2 years ago without James Conner. And then, so that's what led me into the Demercado stuff. But then, you got the Carter quote, the Carter practice that he's first and everything. And even last year, Michael Carter had 17 for 43 and 1. That was in week 18, 4 catches for 16 yards. And he had 13 for 70 and 2 catches for 11 yards. Although I believe that Demercado wasn't active for those 2 games either.
Correct. Yeah, he was out.
So we have these Demercado sample size where Michael Carter wasn't on the team. Then we have this Carter sample size where Demercado was out. And we don't really know what's going to happen this week. But I'm with you. I think both of them are very viable. And I also am finding myself reading more for Demercado, though. And I will say, yes, he is not a scat back either. He's 5'9", 215. Michael Carter is 5'8", 201. So Demercado has an inch and almost 15 pounds on Michael Carter. So if anything, you would think the Demercado was more of the 2-down guy just based on the size alone, and potential skill set as well. I remember Michael Carter was the incumbent that we wanted to be moved aside for Breece Hall whenever Breece Hall got drafted as a rookie. And people were like, why is Michael Carter still getting touches? It should be Breece Hall. So that was a couple years ago as well too, but I don't really know. I think both of them are good starts, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think in this matchup, especially Tennessee is giving up 5.0 yards per carry to running backs, along with 147 total yards and 1.75 touchdowns per game. So both players could deliver this week. One could really deliver big, or maybe perhaps both will do a nice, 70-yard and a touchdown type game.
Maybe it's like that Rachaad White, Sean Tucker game that we had from the Bucs last year when Bucky was out, and then both the guys had like 150 yards and a couple touchdowns or something. Maybe we'll just get that, and everybody's happy. My running back sneaky start this week. It requires Chuba Hubbard to be out, but if Chuba Hubbard is actually out, which there are some, there's a little bit of smoke going on that Chuba's calf injury, I believe it is, was worse after this past week of games than it was coming into the games, which kind of makes sense. If he was already injured, then he played on it some more. He might have injured it a little bit more. But if Chuba Hubbard is inactive, I think Rico Dowdle is a very, very good start. The Dolphins defense are 20th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. They've allowed pretty big games to James Cook. They allowed a big game to Ramondre Stevenson, primarily through the air, but Stevenson had, I think, 14 or 15 PPR fantasy points that week. Jonathan Taylor in week 1 could have had a bigger game. Daniel Jones did vulture 2 goal line touchdowns in that week 1 matchup, but if they had both gone to Jonathan Taylor, then he would have had a phenomenal fantasy week as well. So I think that, obviously, like I mentioned, if Chuba's out, don't play Rico Dowdle, of course. If Chuba's in, don't play Rico Dowdle. And I think Chuba is a very good start. But if Chuba is out, I think Rico Dowdle is a very good player to pick up off of waiver wires and throw right into your starting lineups, again, especially with bye weeks, some other injuries and stuff. So I think Rico's a very good one. If you wanted a backup option, I would also put it on Rachaad White, because it sounds like Bucky is not going to play either. So one of these 2 backups, I think, could be very relevant, or both of them could be very relevant. But I wanted to initially highlight Rico Dowdle, and then if for some reason Chuba plays, I think Rachaad White is another great pickup.
I think Dowdle's extremely playable if Hubbard is out. I think he's the clear lead back there if Hubbard's sidelined and the matchup is good. I've got Dowdle at 45 right now, but that assumes Hubbard plays. Hubbard's at 18, but he might need to, if he's iffy, he might need to move down into the mid-20s and move Dowdle up, because he is in really deep leagues, or if you're in a dire situation, you could start him with Hubbard banged up, with the idea that they are going to give more to Dowdle anyway, to try to take the load off of Hubbard and keep him somewhat healthy. But the smart thing to do probably is to sideline Hubbard if you're the Panthers and let him heal, and just ride Dowdle this week.
Yep. Especially with Dowdle's ability on the goal line. We've already seen that showcased even when Chuba was active. So I think he, like you said, in deep leagues, if you're desperate, he's a good play if Chuba's in. If Chuba's out, great play. Wide receiver position, then the last position. John, do you want to kick us off with your wide receiver sneaky start for the week?
Yeah, Tyreek Hill out for the season I mentioned earlier, where Jaylen Waddle steps into the Dolphins' number one role. He has shown that he can deliver when tasked with a bigger workload, and I'm actually certainly not happy about anybody getting injured, but I am happy that Waddle is back into a larger role. I like rooting for Jaylen Waddle. I like posting the Penguin GIF or GIF, whatever you want to call it, when he scores touchdowns. So this is a good situation for him now in the 44 career games where he's had at least 6 targets, which I would think would be his baseline in most games this rest of season. He's averaged 5.9 catches for 77 yards and nearly half a touchdown per game on 8.5 targets per game. So if he's getting that sort of baseline of 6 targets work, he has produced really nice numbers. I think might get into high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 territory if that sort of workload happens, which I think it will. I don't think he's dusty at all. He's still young and in his prime. It's just been a situation with this offense where he's been the second fiddle and not the consistent target that he was earlier in his career. The Panthers just gave up 6 for 101 to Stephon Diggs. They gave up 55 for 55 to Drake London, which isn't anything big, but I think we can count on 60, 70 yards for Jaylen Waddle this week.
What gives me more confidence, too, is that Tyreek seemed to have he was looking like he was going to be on track to having a very good season. That's definitely kind of a bounce back from last year and all of the bad games that he had with and without Tua. But so far this year, I mean, you look at 6 for 109 in week 2, 5 for 15 to touchdown in week 3. He had 6 for 67 on Monday night prior to getting hurt. So if Waddle is kind of coming more into this wide receiver 1 role, I mean, we could point to what he did as a rookie before Tyreek Hill was there, but then also point to, hey, this is what Tyreek's doing, and Waddle's not all that much worse than Tyreek. Certainly younger as well. So I love it a lot that if you have Jaylen Waddle, you definitely, I think, have a very good wide receiver 2 for the remainder of the season. And a great start this week. My wide receiver sneaky start, another wide receiver benefiting from an injury ahead of him is Darius Slayton. And pairing him with my quarterback sneaky start in Jaxson Dart as well against this New Orleans Saints defense. Slayton last year in the 2 games that Malik Neighbors missed, Slayton averaged 19 PPR fantasy points per game. He had 11 targets in both games, 6 for 57, and then 8 for 122 and 1 in those 2 weeks. The Saints defense, they've been beaten by Marvin Harrison Jr. Had one of his good games this year was against them. The Juwan Jennings week 2 game where he had that 45-yard touchdown was against the New Orleans Saints. JSN has beaten everybody, but he certainly beat the New Orleans Saints. And then Khalil Shakir last week, I believe, had 57 or somewhere in there in the mid-50s and a touchdown against the Saints last week. I think Wan'Dale Robinson, also a very good start, but Wan'Dale was already a guy that I think, especially after the Dallas game, was kind of heavily picked up and was considered as a flex option even before Neighbors got hurt. So I think people are already kind of throwing him into their lineups thinking that he's going to be a good play as more of the wide receiver 1. But I think a lot of people are maybe overlooking Darius Slayton on the waiver wire or just sitting on your bench, that I think he's a very good start this week as more of the higher upside, big play, outside wide receiver for Jaxson Dart in a positive matchup.
I wrote up both players, Wan'Dale and Darius Slayton. The one reason I wrote up Wan'Dale is he's had a couple quiet weeks after that hot start. And I do wonder if Russell Wilson was actually good for him. We'll see what Jaxson Dart does, but we'll see on that. But I wrote up both players, and I wanted to mention Slayton. He has played 89% of the snaps this season, but hasn't seen more than 4 targets in the game. But historically, when he hits at least 5 targets, which is 23 games since 2022, he's averaged 4.2 catches for 64 yards, 0.22 touchdowns on 6.9 targets per game. So when his role is bigger, he has delivered maybe not a lot of touchdowns. I mean, the 0.22 touchdowns per game is not great, but that's sort of might be a Daniel Jones overall passing game issue, less so, Darius Slayton issue. But yeah, I think he was a hot name on the waiver wire this week, and I think he's a really solid start against the Saints.
So there we have it. Those are our 8 sneaky starts, 2 at each position for the Week 5 slate of games this week. We're going to move on then to our Bleacher Nation fantasy card, which, if you are unfamiliar, Bleacher Nation fantasy app has a pick'em style game where you just pick more or less on player props, and you stack up a card, and then you win a certain X multiplier based on how many legs you have in your card. So they do have a promotion going on right now where you get a 50% deposit match up to $100, meaning if you sign up and deposit $200, you get a $100 bonus match in bonus cash to use on the game. And then they run promotions basically every single night that there's island games. So Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night, they run a promotional leg that you can add to that and then potentially win your lineup card. Our card hit last week for a 6x payout, as I mentioned at the beginning, potentially even more because Paulson shouted out Jordan Love's prop line that also hit. So if you included 4 legs, you would have had a larger payout, but our 3-leg payout hit last week. So this week, for Week 5, they are running promotion for Stephon Diggs more than half a receiving yard in the Sunday night game. So that's a very easy leg to just tack on and start building out your lineups. And that's what we are going to start with for this one. John, do you want to hit us with leg number 2?
Yeah, I wrote David Montgomery up this week. He's a funny guy to project because he's always seems to be coming in that 20 to 25 range in a normal week. But then he has some blow up games, and sometimes he has some quiet games. It's not as consistent usage as Jahmyr Gibbs, but this game shapes up to be a David Montgomery game against Cincinnati. They're 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. They're allowing 170 total yards, 1.5 touchdowns per game, 4.7 yards per carry. Montgomery is averaging 5.7 yards per carry. I think this is one where the Lions should control this game from start to finish. And in the second half, they're not going to want to be, giving Jahmyr Gibbs a lot of touches. And Montgomery will probably close out the game. So don't panic at halftime if he doesn't have a good rushing total. But I'm going with more than 50.5 rushing yards for David Montgomery. I've got him projected right around 70. I think this is a good spot for him.
I like it a lot. My leg this week is Garrett Wilson, more than 66.5 receiving yards. Again, they play the Dallas Cowboys defense, which feels like all of the analysis I really need to say for why this leg should hit. But he's been at 95 yards, 84 yards, 82 yards, and has hit this more in 3 out of 4 games. The one week he didn't was that Buffalo game where Justin Fields got knocked out. He still got to 50 on that week. So you would think that in a very positive matchup against a bad defense as the wide receiver 1 for the New York Jets, I believe you have him projected at or above 80 this week. So 66.5 feels like a very solid number to bet the more on.
Yeah, 80. I have him at 86, and he's my wide receiver 2 this week overall, which feels a little dicey because it's Garrett Wilson and the Jets, but it is the Cowboys as well. And the nice thing about the Jets is that they do have Tyrod Taylor as the backup. If there is an issue with Fields getting knocked out of the game or whatever, then he's capable of coming in and delivering the line for us. I think 80. I have him at 86. 66 seems extremely low to me.
So there we have it. Those are our 3 legs for this week's Bleacher Nation fantasy card. Stephon Diggs promo of more than half a receiving yard for the Sunday night game. David Montgomery more than 50.5 rushing. Garrett Wilson more than 66.5 receiving. You will get a 6x payout for those 3 legs hitting this Sunday. And again, just a reminder, a 50% deposit match up to $100 for new users. So you can sign up, download the app on iOS or Google Play Store, and get a 50% deposit match up to $100 in bonus cash. So that is going to wrap things up for this week's episode of the Most Accurate Podcast in our Week 5 sneaky starts. Good luck this weekend for everybody out there playing in fantasy football and playing on Bleacher Nation Fantasy app. We will catch you guys next week in Week 6 for more sneaky starts. See you.